When I was 12, I went to some swimming pools with my best friend. We had a really great time, and then we went off to the changing rooms to get dressed and head back home. So we go into separate cubicles, and I'm getting unchanged, and I have nothing on at this point. And then I look up, and I see a man watching me over the wall of the cubicle. I was feeling everything that you imagine a 12-year-old girl would feel. I was terrified, scared, shocked, confused. I didn't understand what he was doing there or what he might do next. I could only see the top half of his face over the wall, but I'll never really forget this look he had when he realized he'd been caught and as he shrunk back down behind the wall. Now, what that experience really sparked for me was this wondering about how he got that idea. What made him think it would be pleasurable, and I guess what part or parts of his story led him to that day in that cubicle. The next logical question is, how do we all get our ideas about pleasure, about sex, about gender, about relationships? Now, I've been thinking about that question for a really long time. I've worked in sexual health and counselling for a decade, and there's one thing I've come to know for sure. And that is the way that our young people are getting their ideas about sex has changed significantly. And us adults, we need to pay attention. We need to talk about porn. What's coined the new porn landscape that can be really hard for anyone over 25 to understand. Now, I'm in that camp too. So when I was at school, porn was available at the local video store, behind a red velvet curtain. Do you remember the curtain? Yeah. So when I was like this curious, kind of inquisitive kid, and so whenever anyone would come out behind the curtain, I would be doing this. Like, what is happening in this secret room? So what someone would do is that they would choose their content, and then they would take it up to the counter, revealing to the worker what they had chosen, who could be their neighbour because it's a local video store. They would show ID, they would pay money, and then they would go home and they would watch that video in what was probably the only screen in the house, the TV in the lounge. So it was this super public process. Now, I've said I was curious, and I was always really fascinated by bodies, body parts, and how they worked. This totally makes sense now that I have observed my career path. So I was curious about body parts, but my only option was the dictionary. So if I wanted to understand penises, then I would have to look it up. And I definitely did that. And I would get a biological definition. The thing is that our kids are doing the exact same thing that I did, only their dictionary is Google, and it has videos. Playboy was at its peak around 1972, and it had 7 million subscribers every year. While Pornhub is a popular online porn site, and it has 92 million views every day. And that is just one site. We know that porn is embedded into everyday platforms, streaming sites, online games, Reddit, and Instagram. Consumption has increased, so 75% of boys and 58% of girls have seen porn by 17. A quarter of them, 1 in 4, at 12 or younger. 70% of our kids see porn by accident, so they didn't go looking for it, porn found them. A friend of mine has a 10-year-old daughter, and she was one of that 70%. So she's riding on the bus to school one day, and she has her Bluetooth switched on for her phone, which is a pretty normal thing to do, but some kids at the back of the bus, they airdrop her aggressive porn. Now, she didn't ask for that, and they didn't even need her phone number, but she was exposed at age 10. When people ask me what I do, I tell them that I am a sex therapist and that I research porn. That creates for some very awkward moments. And it's either a conversation starter or a conversation stopper. But there are some pretty common responses, and I want to explore just 4 of those with you today. The first is that porn aids us in getting ideas about sex and helps us explore our sexual preferences. Of course, it totally does that. There are so many sites, too many to count. And on each site, there are usually about 25 sexual categories, with between hundreds and thousands of videos in every category. So actually, the real question there is, what kinds of ideas are our young people getting about sex? Before I go any further, I want you to imagine that porn is like a bell curve, okay? So we're not going to talk about any fringe content today. We're only going to talk about the top 4 porn sites in the world, and either some of the most viewed scenes on those sites, or the ones promoted on the homepage that a young person would land on straight away. So earlier this year, I was researching porn content, and here's some of what I found. On Xhamster, the 4th most popular porn site, the homepage promoted scenes titled MILF, Mum I'd Like to Fuck, Shocked and Blackmailed into Sex, followed by Mum Fucks Son, After Husband Dies. Yes, these are also my reactions. Now, in real life, here today, we call the former sexual assault and the latter incest. On XNXX, which is the 3rd most popular site, all those sexual categories are on the homepage, and there are 7 solely dedicated to sexual assault, including the category young, teen, forced. Research backs this up. So studies show that anywhere between 40 and 88% of porn is aggressive. One of those studies revealed that 94% of the aggression is targeted at women. And 95% of the time, the woman responds with a neutral or pleasurable response. So that's the same as you calling me a slut while gagging me, and my responding with, yes please, I like it. I was talking about porn a couple of years ago to a group of young people, and we were talking about sexuality in general. And this boy, he was probably about 16, he came up to me at the end, and he said in a really quiet voice, he said, I think I like hurting girls. And so I queried him a little bit further, and I asked what he thought led to some of those desires. And his thoughts and his words were, I think it's from what I've been watching online. Another study last year asked young people what they believed they had learnt from porn, and a 15-year-old boy said, I now know more about how a woman enjoys herself. We know girls are learning too. So there's this really interesting phenomenon where girls are more likely to watch porn with their friends, with their peers, than they are by themselves. Why? Well, what some of them have expressed to me at least is that they want to know what's expected of them. So yes, porn does aid us in getting ideas about sex, but many of those ideas are unhealthy, unethical, or in some cases, illegal. The second thing that people say is that there is a learning gap for our sexuality and gender diverse young people, where porn helps them understand their identity and its sexual expression. We know that rainbow youth are more likely to become regular viewers of porn, are more likely to use porn for their sex education, and are more likely to try something they've seen in porn. So I've got 3 yeses for you. 1, yes, there is an education gap. 2, yes, it is unacceptable that any members of our community don't have access to positive, healthy, top quality education. 3, yes, we urgently need to create change in this space. Am I right? So let's rewind a little bit. Let's backtrack to the idea that it's helpful for them in that learning journey. I and my husband Dave, we have 3 boys. That is too many. But let's say Sorry, in the future they will see this, know that I love you. And let's say, hypothetically, that one of them comes to me in their late teens and he says that he is same-sex attracted. He says that nobody talked about that at sex ed, so he doesn't really understand what the sexual behaviours would be like. I get it. Should he go do his learning from porn online? Well, on Pornhub, the world's second most popular porn site, earlier this year, the most viewed, most popular gay scene was titled Daddy Bareback Punishes His Naughty Teen Boy. The scene underneath that was titled Straight Daddy Bareback Drills Femboy Pussy. To clarify, bareback means no protection is being used. The advertisement next to these scenes was titled Obedient Slave Boys Used Like Property. See, the researcher and author Christopher Kendall, he identified that gay porn can actually reinforce rather than break down a homophobic discourse. Gay males are degraded because of their feminine traits. The typically straight-looking partner is the one that has power, control, and dominance over the gay-looking partner. So yes, there is an education gap. And yes, porn is a teacher, but not a good one. Pleasure, consent, safety, those lessons are not learnt from mainstream porn. And our rainbow youth deserve better. The third thing that people say to me is that porn has liberated women. Can you tell what I think? That it has empowered them to be body confident and sex positive. A documentary maker called me a few months back to comment on a new animated porn scene that was growing in popularity. It's about a virgin princess called Daisy. And Daisy is getting ready for her wedding night. And her friend tells her that she will magically turn herself into a man and teach her how to have sex. And so she does that. She uses a magic wand and she becomes a male with a dark-skinned face. And she begins to have penetrative sex. The now male partner begins to have penetrative sex with Daisy. Daisy is in pain and she says, "Stop, it hurts." Later on in the scene, Daisy turns to her partner and she says, "You raped me." But once the sexual act is finished, Daisy says, "Thanks for not listening to me. I liked it." We know that of young people who have seen porn, 70% of them have seen something non-consensual. 80% of them have seen a woman being called swear words, and 90% of them have seen a male controlling or dominating another person. That video was called Magical Sleepover. It's animated in such a way that it looks a little bit like a Disney movie. It's available on over 15 sites. It's had well over 10 million views. And if you search Magical Sleepover, as a 10-year-old might do, it sits right next to Dora the Explorer on Google image search results. I, Jo, am a 31-year-old woman. I feel this stuff in my bones. I have 3 tertiary qualifications, including a Master's of Science in Medicine, specialising in psychosexual therapy. I have studied trauma, abuse, gender, sexuality, and power dynamics. I grew up in a feminist household with parents who told me that women were equal and sex was healthy. But when I see mainstream porn, I feel belittled as a woman. I lose confidence in my body. I feel like my society mustn't value me or my gender. If I am feeling that as a capable, equipped adult, imagine what it's like for the teenagers in your life who don't get any counter-messaging from adults. Should I tell my goddaughter that Daisy's sexual assault in Magical Sleepover is female liberation in 2019? Maybe it's just me. But this is not where I hoped we would be. The fourth thing that people say to me is that not all porn is like that, the dominant abusive kind, and that is totally true. So there are some groups working really hard to create an alternative called ethical porn. Ethical porn is a pretty new genre. It prioritizes female pleasure, it has body diversity, and it seeks to be made under good working conditions. Ethical porn is niche. You have to know what to search for and where to go. It costs money, always. It requires a credit or a debit card, and it's not even a category on mainstream porn sites. Ethical porn is not what your young person will see if they Google sex, just out of curiosity, like I would have. It's really important to know that there is a difference between adult and youth porn use. You see, most adults have been or are sexually active, so they have at least some real-life reference points from which they can critique what they are seeing on the screen. But with 1 in 3 of our boys seeing porn, by the time they turn 13, they may not have even held someone's hand. The team here, they asked me for my idea worth spreading for this talk. So here it is. You must talk to the teenagers in your life about porn. This is non-negotiable. When I say that to parents particularly, they respond by saying, but our kids don't want to talk about sexual stuff with us. And they may not want to, but they need to. So we don't give our kids keys to the car without teaching them how to drive. So why would we just give them free rein on the internet without preparing them for the risks? They may tell you to shut up or go away. That is okay. What you've done is planted a thought, a seed, that porn might not be healthy for them. The next thing that all adults anywhere say to me is, how would I even start that conversation? Well, this part I call heart, head, and hands. Okay, so imagine you've found out your young person has seen porn. The first thing you do is you respond to their heart. You ask them how they're feeling. How did they feel when they saw it? Were they concerned, confused, traumatized? Did they feel pressured? Do they feel safe? Be a soft pillow for them, not a concrete slab. The second thing is you're addressing their head. So you're unpacking some of the problematic messages of porn. That it doesn't set us up well to have a good sex life, that it teaches us that hurting people is okay, and that it teaches us that consent is not that important. Then you take their hand, metaphorically speaking, and you make a plan. So you talk about filters, you talk about privacy settings, you talk about how to respond to pressure, you talk about how we all, adults included, need to manage our devices better. This is not a one and done kind of conversation for any of you who are like, this sounds terrible. Okay, so you're checking in every few weeks, every few months to ask them if they've seen porn again, if they had any questions about it, if their friends had seen it, and just to remind them that you are a safe person to talk to. You know, the best word that I can think of for sex is yummy. But I spend a lot of my time watching and researching painful, degrading sex. It's impacted my parenting, it's impacted my body confidence, it's impacted my mental health, and it's even impacted my marriage. Why would I do that? Because I want to intervene. I don't want the porn industry to be the sex educator for my boys. I want my kids and your kids, whether you're a teacher, a parent, a youth worker, a social worker, anything, I want all of our kids to have sexual experiences that are about empathy, emotional connection, that are safe, that are consensual, and are pleasurable. We must talk to the teenagers in our life about porn, so that can be their story. Thank you.